I'm Evan Hunt. I'm a 20-year Air Force combat veteran, business leader, and a family man running for Congress here in Texas's 3rd District. And although I'm the host and a political candidate, I don't want tonight to be about politics, especially not partisan politics. We need to get back to a place away from the extremes and our own echo chambers and talk with reasonable voices, with experts, and have healthy dialogue and debate. And tonight is about our communities and our kids. So thank you all for being here. And I'm going to introduce our illustrious panel guests in 1 second. But as you know, our public schools are the heart of our communities. They're the foundation of our democracy. They shape our kids, they anchor our neighborhoods, and they drive long-term strength and economic prosperity in cities like McKinney and across Texas's 3rd District, from Collin County to Hunt County and beyond. As a parent with kids in the public schools, I feel the issues the same way most of you do, which is very personally. To give you some context, I've had the opportunity to experience the good, bad, and the ugly from private and public schools across the country. My mother, Neen, who's right there, is a career educator who was a private school principal for 30 years and the founding principal of a charter school in Florida. I went to a private school when I was young, and eventually I transitioned to large Connecticut public schools for middle school and high school. My kids went to a Montessori school when they were in pre-K, and then they attended public schools in Simsbury, Connecticut, in Los Angeles, California, and eventually right here in McKinney, Prosper, Texas. And after all that experience, here's the reality. Private schools can be great and unique, but only when they must compete with public schools on a level playing field. And public schools are only great when they are well funded, when local leaders have control over their budgets, and when parents and community members act as partners instead of adversaries. So we're holding this forum because families deserve real discussion and straight answers. In the last year alone, we've seen 3 public schools decide to close in McKinney. We've watched enrollment shift, budgets tighten, teachers leaving the profession, and in Austin, where Vicki Goodwin works, there's a lot of debate about new policies such as vouchers that significantly impact every classroom, and sometimes it's without talking to the people in communities, right? So we appreciate Vicki driving that up. Tonight we're going to look at real questions facing Texas education. We'll talk about teacher shortages, political mandates coming from the state, parental involvement and the tension between local control and parents. We'll talk about the proposed closure of the Department of Education and ask whether the claims of woke indoctrination match the reality in our classrooms. We'll discuss the linkage between property taxes and our schools, and we'll look at how federal programs, from special education to support for fast growth districts, can help communities manage demographic change like ours. That's some of the fastest growing towns and countries in America, towns and counties in America. So this matters because every child in our community deserves a safe, strong public school option. And every parent deserves education leaders who put facts, solutions, and kids above politics. And the panel before you is an example of those leaders. We have Representative Vicki Goodwin, who is a 4th-term Texas lawmaker and a strong advocate for public education. And now she's running for lieutenant governor, one of the most powerful roles in the state. She's consistently fought vouchers and worked on appropriations to ensure every child has access to quality neighborhood schools. Goodwin is running to put Texans first and lead for one of the most consequential seats in state government. We have Angie Beto, who is a longtime civic leader and dedicated defender of public education in McKinney. She chairs Public Schools First McKinney, a nonpartisan PAC focused on protecting local schools, and serves as president of the McKinney PTA Council. And through these roles, she works closely with families and educators to ensure strong, vibrant schools for every child. And she helped a lot with coordination of this event. So thank you. We have James Houston. James is a senior at McKinney High School and a president of the McKinney Area High School Democrats, which he founded as a freshman. He leads youth voter engagement efforts and encourages students to participate in civic dialogue and policy discussions. James is committed to empowering young people to shape their communities and strengthen democracy, and I am very impressed by James. And we have Mr. George King, who after 40 years as a teacher and a principal, retired in 2023, but has not stopped supporting Texas students. He's championed safe, high-performing schools throughout his career, and now teaches adult learners at Grayson College while helping prepare future educators. And he was a 2024 Democratic nominee for State Board of Education District 12, and he remains a strong voice for the Texas Public Schools. And we have Gabrielle Fain. Gabe? Okay, it's fine. All right. Gabe has spent 29 years teaching in North Texas. First in Plano and now in Frisco ISD, so he's boots on the ground. At Heritage High School, he teaches humanities, leads academic decathlon, and serves as the district's high school lead GT teacher. Yes. Across 12 campuses. His influence extends nationally through work with the College Board, ETS, Albert.io, and multiple education foundations. Thank you for taking the time. And we have Mr. Herb Krashner. I want to make a special call out to Jeremy Sutka and the Collin County Democratic Party for introducing us to Herb. Herb is a...
You call me Herb? Herb.
Herb. Sorry. Voice. Herb.
Thank you.
A retired UT professor and consultant. He's become an unexpected truth teller about what's really happening in Texas public schools. And about how to spell his pronunciation. His deep research exposes how privatization and long-standing system failures harm student outcomes. And now he's focused on giving Texans honest, data-driven insight to fix the challenges holding back our public schools. So Herb is our guest speaker. Thank you so much for driving up here, Herb. He came from Austin as well. And I'm going to turn it over to you, sir.
Wow, thank you. It's great to see you all. Thank you for braving the elements and getting out here. Thank you for introducing me. I appreciate that. I don't need to go into any much depth, other than to say that I got into this area quite by accident. I'm not a public educator. And the way I got into it was a couple of years ago when I started hearing about this voucher program. And I started hearing some of our leaders talking about it. And I have a BS indicator that goes off pretty quickly, okay? And I said, that doesn't sound right. And so I started digging as an empirical researcher for several decades. I decided, let's see if I can find the facts. And I started digging. And the more I dug, the more I found, and the more I dug. And so I quite accidentally became an expert. Really, accidentally. But I do believe that knowledge is power. And I believe that common knowledge is even more powerful, and especially when it's based in a set of objective facts and data. So what I'm going to do here tonight is something I haven't done before. I spent 5 decades as a complex computer systems analyst, going in and working with companies to analyze their systems and to make them and to help them improve them. Most of that work has never been seen because it was done under NDA. But nonetheless, I've decided to take that approach with looking at our public schools by basically taking a look at it as a system from the outside in. Okay, so my perspective is, as an outsider, what you're going to hear from these folks are positioned from the inside view. All right, and so I'm going to try to establish what I think are the main problems that we need to be solving in our public schools, because I completely object to throwing away our public schools and making them private. Okay, that's a non-starter in Texas, I think. Anyway, but I do think that our Texas public schools are at a crossroads, right? And I think it's time that we take a look at it from a fresh perspective. Oh, by the way, breaking news. For those of you who are voucher fans, nobody really knows, this just happened 3 hours ago. Okay? Tennessee parents sued to block the new statewide private school voucher program. That happened at, that happened at 3 p.m. today. So that is breaking news. And that means that Tennessee now joins about 7 other states who are all in the process of suing for a similar reason. So Arkansas, Missouri, Utah, Idaho, who am I forgetting? South Carolina, Ohio, Wyoming. Anyway, there's a list where these lawsuits are going on, and I'm just hoping that somebody here in Texas decides that it's worth doing this right here, even though the odds are stacked against them when it comes to the Texas Supreme Court, which we know. But anyway, so that's breaking news. I thought you'd like to hear about that. All right, which brings me to talk about our own Constitution. So this is a phrase from our Texas Constitution which establishes what it is that our legislature is supposed to be doing for our public schools. Okay, and this is from February 15, 1876. They realized that public schools were important, and they established this. Okay? And so this is what our state legislators should have been paying attention to, but they haven't been for the last couple of decades. And we'll talk about why that is. Okay, so basically from this perspective, all right, what I'm seeing from the outside in are the main problems that are happening with our public school system today. And I'll start with the one that everybody knows about. They're underfunded. Now I'm going to show you by how much they're underfunded, just so you have the facts again, okay? But another part of it that goes along with them being underfunded is the fact that they're overregulated. Okay, most people don't think about or even realize that this is a problem, right? But this overregulation that's going on is causing most of the inflexibility and inefficiencies and bureaucracy that's happening in the schools that our state leaders then turn around and blame the schools for. Hello? All right, and the best metric that I have for this, and which I'll show you in a second, I think you'll enjoy. Okay, they're undervalued. Our public schools are undervalued with respect to the public benefit that they in fact provide. And I've developed a metric that I'm going to show you to prove that. Okay? And I think we have to admit that they're underperforming. And mostly for the reasons above. Okay? With all that stress and pressure, you know, it's not, it's not strange that they would be underperforming on the basics. And then fifthly, there's this misguided privatization scheme that's being foisted upon us here in Texas. And it is completely misguided and wrong-headed, and we'll talk about why that is. Okay? Now, you know, not everybody is the same, obviously, and so the different school districts are feeling this differently. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples from right around here. We also have the challenge of population shifting and attendance dynamics. There are all sorts of challenges. Okay? Lots of problems. But from a system perspective, looking at this from the outside in, I think these are the 5 big problems. And I think what we need to do is have a plan to fix these problems. And we don't have one today. So I'm going to propose a plan because nobody else has when we get to the end of the presentation, and then you guys can shoot holes at it. Okay, so here's how much we're underfunded. Okay, that's the national average on the left per student per year. That's us on the right. Okay? Okay, now, I know that you've heard that, you know, the legislature made this great and wonderful $8.5 billion investment, okay, but when you boil that down, that only really added $742 per student per year to the funding. So now we're only about $3,500 still below the national average. And the other thing you might not know is actually the state of Texas is the lowest, okay, supplies the lowest per student amount of all the states, all 50 states for K through 12. Did you know that? No. That's why your property taxes are so high. It is. It is. It's because the state is underfunding their portion of our funding, okay? And they're on the very bottom. They're last in the nation, okay? And that is one of the big reasons. Okay, here's the overregulation problem. How many of you have ever seen the Texas Education Code? Anybody? Oh, a couple of you have. Well, let me present it to you. It's right over here behind Vicki. Okay, here it is. It's almost 5,000 pages printed out. It weighs over 51 pounds. Okay, and it's chock full of rules and regulations, many of which are considered to be unfunded mandates, many of which are overly bureaucratic and don't address the real problems, but are there causing the inefficiencies and inflexibility. All right, that 5,000 pages is one of the things that we're dealing with. Now, compare that, for example, if you will, okay, to the charter schools. Okay, the Texas rules and regulations for charter schools, 233 pages, not 5,000 pages. No wonder they're more flexible. Okay, how about private schools? The rules and regulations are 5 pages. Okay, and here they are. All right here, you can look at them. All right, print them out. Half of them are optional. That is, they don't have to do certain things. So, back to your comment. All right, does this look like a level playing field to you? Right, to make the public schools compete with the private schools? 5,000 pages, 5. Okay? So that's basically the overregulation problem, and if I could, I would basically throw this away and start over. Okay, undervalued. Now what I'm going to show you here is a look at both the state and local funding together as a percentage of total taxpayer income. That is a metric of the value that the state places on public education. Okay? And the national average is about 3.25% across all of the states in the United States. Guess what Texas is?
Under 2.
No, not under 2, but 3. Okay? It's lower, obviously, than the national, so here we are below average again in terms of how much value we place on our public schools relative to our income, the wealth of our state. But you know who's worse than Texas? Arizona. And you know who's on the very bottom? No, that's a good guess. Florida. Okay, Florida's on the very bottom. And do you know who has the 2 biggest voucher programs in the United States? Arizona and Florida. Those are the 2 biggest universal voucher programs, and they just happen to be on the very bottom in terms of value placed on public education. And that's why on my car I have this bumper sticker. That's right. I've got that on my car, don't I? You've seen it. Okay, I showed it to you. Okay. All right. Let's talk about underperforming. Let's talk about academics. Okay? And you may not want to see this. But again, this is on a statewide average kind of thing. Okay, so the main problem as I see it today is the lack of critical thinking skills coming out of our schools. And here's where we are in terms of math proficiency. Okay, notice what's been happening over the last 15 years. And this is our scores based on the NAEP. You know what that is, the Nation's Report Card? Those of you who are educators, you know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, so this is our state level proficiency, and notice we're below average, we're underneath the national average again. Right now, our students are doing math at a level of 24% of proficiency across all the grades. Okay, the other problem is the literacy problem. All right, this has been going on for quite a while. Okay, and we're below average in this category too. Okay, but this is a pretty well-known problem. So one of my questions, you know, for our state leaders, again, trying to be nonpartisan, all of our state leaders, is why aren't they solving these problems? Why are they busy focusing on having us post the 10 Commandments in schools, or interjecting Bible stories into our curriculum? Why aren't they solving those problems? Okay, here's one more metric I'll show you. SAT scores. Okay, the state's average SAT score is 978. And that's fairly significant because 73% of the 2025 graduating class took the SAT. So it's a meaningful metric. The national average is 1,028. We're 50 points below the national average for our kids graduating high school. Okay, now, is that enough proof to show you that we have a bit of an academic problem to solve? I hope so. Okay? Now, let's talk about privatization. I know this is the one that really got me going. It got me into this area. Okay, Greg Abbott at a recent rally, he basically said, school choice affects competition. What he didn't tell you is whether it affects it positively or negatively. Okay, it turns out it affects it negatively for exactly the reason you talked about. And then he goes on to say that our public schools, private schools, home schools, are all going to be better because the ability to choose the education path that's best for each child. A choice that we've always had. We've never not had the choice as parents. You all know that. And so this goes right up there with my BS indicator. Okay, this is just another one of the misrepresentations that falls out of his mouth. Okay, and the thing of it is universal school voucher programs like the one we're putting in place have never worked anywhere. And I can show you the data. What I do is I read the newspapers in Florida, Arizona, Tennessee. Okay, that's what I do. And I can tell you. Okay? So what tends to happen is, and what's going to happen with this program is it becomes welfare for the well-off. And I'm going to show you the numbers on that a little bit. And what the governor has done is he's turned this into a popularity contest. Okay, with the offer of free money. Who's not going to take free money? If the state government is stupid enough to give away $13 billion, who's not going to take it? And I don't blame people for that. I really don't. Okay, I mean, if you've got a kid in private school and this helps you with that and helps the kid, God bless you. Really. Okay? But from a state perspective, this is a problem. Okay, he also said that his plans won't stop there, but this is what his real goal is. This is what you need to be scared of. His real goal is to make all the public schools private. Now, he won't tell you that. Okay, you won't hear him say that, but that's his goal. Okay, and so what he's been doing, okay, starving the public schools, introducing vouchers, okay, blah, 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 blah. I think you can see the path that we're going down. Okay, people don't really know about the voucher program because it hasn't hit them yet. But this is what's going to happen on one slide. These are the details of it. You'll hear the governor say, this is just a $1 billion program. It's a drop in the bucket. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. No, it's a $13 billion program. Okay, as it was estimated with the bill. And you're going to start hearing about it because the advertising will be starting soon. When they open the application window in January, there will be a bunch of schools out there, with billboards on the highway saying, please come use your voucher and come to my school. Okay, that's what's going to happen. All right, and then we're going to see a bunch of sign-ups next year, but the real thing happens in school year 27 when the program triples in size. Okay, 300% growth happens in school year 27, 28. Okay, and so that's the one. Oh, by the way, they changed the name of it while you weren't watching. Okay, it used to be called Education Savings Accounts. Now it's called Education Freedom Accounts. Okay, somebody figured out that there aren't going to be any savings. Okay, I wonder who did that. Anyway, so that's my one slide summary. I'm not going to bore you with all that. But let me get to the bottom line. So this is what I think is going to happen next year. There's $920 million available for these vouchers. Okay? And so what I think is going to happen, which has happened in all the other states, 70% or above of the students that get vouchers will have already been enrolled in private school. Yeah. Okay? That's been the case in Arizona, Florida, and just about everywhere. They're already there. Okay? And so let's say that 110,000 slots get funded. Okay, look where the money's going to go. All right? And so the bottom line is, okay, $800 million of this billion, 80% of it is going to go to fund students that are not currently being funded by the state or by you. Think about that. Okay? Where's that money coming from? It's coming from your pocket. It's coming from your pocket one way or the other because that's the only money that the state has. It's either coming from your sales taxes or it's coming from, okay, but it's coming from you. Right? So this is one of the things that, by the way, drives conservatives crazy. They hate this, and this is why when we went through the testifying phase, for the bill at the legislature, most of the half of the people were Republicans objecting to this program, and half were Democrats, and everybody knew it was wrong. Okay, but that didn't stop anybody. Okay, locally. So one of the things that I like to do when I go to community is try to do something locally and show you what the local impact is likely to be. And so I think you know about this, I would imagine, from McKinney ISD. Let me show you the numbers. Okay, so this is my projection of what's going to be happening to. By the way, I'll send these slides to Evan, and he'll send them to everybody. Okay, so you don't have to take notes. Just look. But here's what's going to happen. okay, because you're already running deficits in McKinney ISD, all right, and when you start losing some students to this voucher program, and I basically estimated that you're not about 1%, a fairly modest number, but that's going to have an impact on a school district that's already dealing with deficits. But the real shit hits the fan, pardon me, when you get out to school year 28, and if Abbott gets his way, okay, and does away with property taxes, McKinney ISD loses 80% of its funding. You don't think that'll put them out of business? That's what happens if property tax gets eliminated. 80%. Okay. And then, by the way, I've done the same calculation for a number of the other ISDs, and Allen isn't looking too good either. Allen's got the same problem. Some of the other schools, not so big a problem because they're much smaller. Okay? But this is what I project will happen in this area. And the other thing I like to do is, I also did an analysis of the private schools. These are all the private schools that are not just kindergarten in Collin County. So you've got somewhere around 11, but I know this is an eye chart. I promise you'll get the real thing, okay? But basically you've got 11,000 some odd kids in private school in Collin County. You have a whole bunch of options for sending kids to private schools that the rural counties don't have. So most of the private schools are in the metro areas. The more rural guys have none to choose from, but you've got plenty, and there's capacity. So there's a good chance that more will leave your public schools. Yes, sir?
How many of those private schools are religiously based?
Oh, well, just look at the, I didn't really do the analysis of that, but just look at the names if you can, and you'll see that probably 80% of them are religiously based.
Does that have anything to do with Abbott in the legislature pushing these plans?
Absolutely. One of his major donors was Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilkes, to the tune of several $1 million. So yes, absolutely. Okay, so what I want you to look out for this coming year, okay, as far as the voucher program is concerned, watch for how many students apply, okay, how many are accepted into the program, how many were already enrolled in private school, okay, how many of the public school students went home. Remember all those kids that have not been attending classes? They're all going to go home and get $2,000 to do that. And we're going to lose headcount. Okay? And then the big one, how many are left in the waiting line after that $1 billion is spent? Because that will be the basis for the allocation for the money that will be asked for in the next session. And so the idea is to run that up as high as possible to provide the justification for how popular this program is, and so that it can be tripled in size next legislative session. That's what's going to happen. Okay? How many students left the program and went back to public schools? Oh, they're not counting that. It's in the law, not counting that. Okay? How much dark money came from unidentified sources into Odyssey, this new administrative vendor, via gifts, grants, oh, that's a misspelling. Grifts, grants, and donations. Sorry about that. It was a typo. Okay? But you know what? They're not required to report that. It's in the law. Okay? And so dark money will be coming into this program. How much additional money will be injected into this program by the governor from sources other than appropriations? Oops, you didn't see that. There's about 5 other funding sources identified in the law that are not appropriations that Abbott can draw from. And so he'll grow the program while nobody's looking. Okay? And then, of course, there's this one, Abbott getting rid of all property taxes. And so you've probably seen his plan. I'm just going to put it up here. Okay? Here's his plan for property tax relief and killing the public schools all at once. Okay? He's going to make it hard to increase taxes to cover the public schools, and he's going to make it easy to roll them back. And then he's basically going to give the voters the opportunity to decide to eliminate them altogether. And of course, in his big, great plan, he has no alternate funding sources identified. Okay? All right. So I have a plan. I do. I have a plan. No, I'm going to throw this out there for you all to consider. Okay? I want to fix the public schools. I don't really see any good reason, for many, many reasons, why we should be privatizing our public schools. So as far as the voucher program is concerned, Let's add the accountability measures that are not in there today, all right? And let's kill it quickly if we can, either by lawsuit or by some other mechanism that maybe somebody on the panel will talk something about. Okay? Fix the darn public school system. If I was Gretchen Whitmer, I'd say fix the damn public school system. You remember her Fix the Roads campaign? Okay. All right, I think we should have open enrollment public schools across the board. Okay? That's plenty of choice. If you don't like McKinney, you go down to Allen or Plano, whatever. Let them work it out. Okay? Let the money follow the students within the public school system. Why send the money out to the private schools? Okay? Encourage cooperation among school districts. Let's do some regional balancing. Okay? No reason why they have to operate separately. Ditch the STAR test. Worthless piece of junk. Okay? And all the bureaucracy that goes with it, throw it out. Throw it all out, okay? Use the NAEP test, which is a national norm, and or the MAP test, which is already used widely throughout the state. Why do we need the STAR test? Because somebody in Texas invented it to solve a problem that they thought was a problem, blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's doge the TEA while we're at it, okay? If we don't need all this 5,000 pages of education code, why do we need the TEA anyway? All they do is take over school districts, okay? Well, maybe they do more than that, okay? But we definitely want to doge the education code. I want to throw that away, or burn it. Oh, by the way, this version of the Texas Education Code was discovered in Michael Morath's attic. Oh, never mind. That was supposed to be a joke, it fell. Get rid of the Robin Hood plan, okay, and move away from a heavy reliance on property taxes, okay, because I think, well, that's basically what people would like, and there's a reason why it's that way now, but it doesn't have to continue to be that way. Okay, academic improvement goals. In 3 years, let's raise the level of reading proficiency in 4th grade above the national average. Modest goal, not number one. Let's just get above the national average. Same thing in math proficiency. Okay, focused on algebra in 8th grade. Okay, all the graduating students, let's take the SAT, ACT, and then let's raise our scores above the national average. Let's use known best practices and accountability tracking to accomplish that. There are ways to do this, just not in Texas. We're not doing it, but other states are. Okay, and after 3 years, raise the expectations bar. Okay, get each local community involved in planning and achieving that. Okay, get them on to a systematic improvement plan, focused on a goal, an objective, a measurable one. Okay, why not? Why not? What do we got to lose? Okay, develop the counter argument to eliminating all property taxes. I'm not saying, it's okay with me to decrease them, okay, and decrease the reliance on them, but where do we make up the difference? Well, I like the spread the joy approach. Okay, spread the joy, let's expand the sales tax by a couple of pennies, okay? Let's create a new workforce education tax. Who's the beneficiary of the graduates of our schools? The companies, the businesses. Why don't they participate in this process? Okay, we already have a business franchise tax, so let's create a workforce education tax within that. Okay, offload some of that. The yearly surplus funds that we're accumulating, again this year, going to be a huge surplus. The rainy day funds, which are maxed out, $25 billion, and then savings from state government shrinkage. Let's take the savings from doging the TEA, okay, and put that money back into the public schools. Okay, so that's kind of my approach. Right? And then step 4 in my plan is educate the public over the next year. Get the public on board and educate the voters, especially the ones who live out in the boonies where I live that are clueless. Okay? So when I talk about this stuff out in the boonies, people go, huh? I wear my Save Our Public Schools hat, and they go, what's that about? So it's still the case that people are voting without knowledge. Okay, I've already run over, so just let me say quickly that this is the trend in reading proficiency at the national level and at the Texas level.
About the linkage between property tax and public school funding. Thank you, Angie.
I'm going to tell a story because I lived this, and I think a story is often more powerful sometimes than facts. So, we lived in Oregon in the most, was that a comment? In the most prestigious city in the state for 3 years, from 97 to 2000. My daughter was in high school. My youngest child, my oldest was in college, but my youngest was in elementary school. And so I'm gonna reiterate what you said, because we live this every day. Our schools, so our city was only about 33,000 people, right? And it was landlocked, so we weren't growing. And our schools, the high schools, the lockers were falling apart in the halls, the paint was peeling. Now mind you, the average income in that city, and this was all those years ago, 25 years ago, was well over $100,000, right? So the kids didn't have books. We had an education foundation like we do in McKinney, in which in McKinney we raised money to provide scholarships for students, and we raised money to give scholarships and grants to teachers, right? But we raised money to pay teachers' salaries. We raised money for technology. My daughter went to high school from 10 a.m. to 2. Why? Because we didn't have enough teachers. We couldn't afford them. So on top of that, everything was pay to play. If you wanted to be in student government, you paid. She paid for cheerleading. I mean, not just the uniform and whatever. She paid to participate for the coach, right? She paid to play lacrosse. We paid for everything that we needed to do as we walked into those stores. I was fundraising chair of our PTO. We raised $95,000 in excess funds into the year 2000. Why? Because we had to pay for all these things that the state couldn't afford to pay. We had copied California, which at that time was big on property tax cap, just what our governor's talking about doing, and handicapping people's ability, local government's ability to raise funds that they need desperately. So I'm just sharing that story because I think it's a powerful way to get the information out where people are thinking about, wow, this is great to save our pocketbooks. That's true, but there are huge consequences.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just not realistic to say that we're gonna get rid of property taxes. The sales tax would have to go up to 22, 25, I don't know, some crazy amount. It just doesn't make sense. The state's share, so we do a pie chart every year, and the state's share went from about 5 years ago, 34%, and it just keeps creeping down, 33, 32, 31. So the state share right now is around 30%. It should be 50%.
Right.
And if we got back to where the state was participating equally with locals, then our property taxes wouldn't go up so much from year to year. And the whole recapture system, I asked the TEA commissioner about this, you know, why don't we know what school district our money is going to? Because in Austin, our recapture payments are the highest of anywhere in the state. Austin recapture is 20% of the entire state's recapture. So it's a huge amount, and Austin is seeing a lot of school closures in the future. But the TEA commissioner said, well, we used to do it that way, where you would see your dollars from Austin are going to Del Valle or some other district. But we don't do that anymore, and we're not going to go back to that because that would be too transparent.
Can I ask a question about recapture or Robin Hood? Because I remember in the early 90s when that first started, I remember all the debate on that and everything at the time. And I remember that the idea was, if I can recall that long ago, what the arguments were that I still remember is that we had school districts in Texas where some, that kids couldn't even have one book, they were having to share books. And then there were super rich districts where kids could, these were the examples, had a book in school and then also one to bring home. And so that the idea of it was to do money around so that education in Texas was more uniform, that everybody had what they needed. But something has happened along the way, like that's part of like what you're saying, that it's just, and now they're holding on to part of it, they're not passing it out to schools.
So as I've been traveling around the state, I've been seeing problems. So in South Texas, there is a school district called the South Texas Independent School District. It started out as only for special ed students, but it now incorporates all, and apparently it is so wealthy that it brought in, I don't know, marble from it. I don't know if that story was true. But from people down in South Texas, there is a lawsuit against that school district right now. So it just makes you wonder, are we really, is our money being spent in a proper way? We need more transparency.
There's less transparency.
$10 million went to Colorado through a charter school program, so I had a bill that would have said the school district where that charter is has to approve any funding that would go out of state.
Yeah.
That bill didn't go anywhere. I've had some bills that dealt with charter schools because when you have a traditional elementary school and a charter school opens up right next door and maybe another one on the other side, you're draining the students away and you're using the same bucket of money, but now you're dividing it among three, and that just doesn't make sense. So there's a lot of things that we could do to improve our school funding, but that's not what our leadership is interested in right now.
Well, yeah, on top of that, so there's the tax burden we have, right, at the ISD level with property taxes, and then there's the state's, I guess, contribution to public schools, which we're saying is decreasing. And then there's also federal money that's available to help public schools, especially in rapidly growing areas. And I'm only familiar with some sources of federal funding. I heard you taught me the school lunch program is federal funding, and I know a lot of our special needs students through the IDEA program are heavily funded by federal dollars. But the trick with federal dollars is you have to go ask for them. You have to go make the case, and then you have to be willing to take them. And my understanding is that lately we've been saying no, or we haven't been taking advantage of that, or our representatives haven't been going and arguing for it. So who would like to talk about federal funding within schools?
I can speak to it a little bit. So it is mostly for special ed and lunch programs for Title I. But one of the issues that we had is that the school districts were going along saying, we're getting these therapy services for the kids, and they would get reimbursed. Well, the federal government came and said, oh, you didn't mark them correctly, you didn't code them correctly, so we need about $18 million back. So now the school districts are like, we're not even gonna ask for that money because we're afraid that we're gonna code something incorrectly, and therefore they're gonna come along and ask for the money back. This is 17 years ago that the coding was done incorrectly, and the federal government asked for it last year, and so you're impacting today's students when this was from forever ago, you know? And so I understand why the school districts are hesitant to take federal dollars. It should be, you can't change the rules of the game after, in the middle of the game. That's the problem that we have.
I am concerned about this dismantling of the Department of Education in which schools depend on title money, Titles 1, 2, and 3, to come into public schools to take care of our most vulnerable children. Here I go again. One of public education's most proud achievements, I believe, is the special education program, where we raise the floor and we provide an equitable playing field for these children to participate in public education. Who would be against that? But now we're eroding the Department of Education. We're sort of pushing different programs into the Department of Labor and other places. And I fear that programs like special education, Section 504 for our children who have health issues, limited English proficiency programs, bilingual programs, all of those are going to go by the wayside as well. So we're taking the supports that we proudly use to help our most vulnerable children, and we begin to push them away, erode them away, and that's what I fear about the loss of federal funding.
And to compound it, what's gonna happen is they're gonna go away, they're just gonna push it to the classroom teacher and say, you now have to deal with all of these issues.
Yeah. Yes.
And no one's gonna wanna be a teacher if they have to juggle 15,000 different things. We already juggled 10. 15's too much.
Yeah, I think there's at the heart of a lot of these discussions, there's this small government, big government debate. And is government bad? I try to always tell people, my experience has been, it's not that big government's bad or government's inherently bad. It's when you have the wrong people in government. That's what's bad. And taxes aren't evil. I hear a lot of this in Texas too. Taxes are evil. Taxes aren't bad, but taxes without representation is bad. And certainly taxes when you as the taxpayer, you don't feel the benefit, that's bad too. So we've drifted into a little bit of an ideological debate, so I'm going to shift to ideological questions. So lately, we have political and ideological mandates creeping into our public schools. My daughter sent me a picture of the 10 Commandments posted in her classroom. And there's restricting of library books that affect local control in classroom instruction. So I think, Gabe, I'll ask you,
They toss it to me.
and then go over to James
Great.
for his perspective. But yeah, thank you.
So you might have noticed that yesterday there was a lawsuit that was, a judge said we could take them down in Frisco. So I wasn't there today, I had a doctor appointment, but someone came and took the poster down. But we were told we can't talk about it, because that's a controversial issue. And there's education code about controversial issues that we can't talk about. We couldn't talk about why it was there to begin with, and now we can't talk about why it's gone.
Is that a commandment? Thou shalt not talk controversial issues?
It's interesting. So now there's just a blank space where it used to be, and we'll just look at it and see why it's not there.
1984.
But the library book thing is interesting, because someone sent me a presentation that was given to administrators. And it's about personal books that I have in my classroom that I've collected over 29 years from colleges, from seminars and these things. I have to get every one of those books approved. I have to inventory them first, 3 bookshelves. When I'm doing that, I don't know. If a current Frisco school library doesn't have that title already, in any district, in any school, I have to seek approval for it. So what teacher is going to spend the time doing that? They're just going to load it up and go to half-price books, so our students are going to have less resources, the ones that I've bought over 29 years, because it is the culture war. It is a certain party's way of ginning up support by getting people angry about one-offs. You know, you don't develop systems for one-offs. You don't develop procedures and policies for the outlier. And that's what we're doing with these book policies, 10 Commandments.
They had an anti-furry bill. They were trying
Yeah,
to
because you know, it's such a problem.
Yeah.
I see furries every day.
Yep.
I know.
Oh, yeah.
No, never.
Well, you guys see too, because a lot of us, we all taught humanities for years, and we taught religion, but we taught the facts about religions. I helped write the Confluence for Cultures in Plano years ago, and all of our kids brought foods in, and we talked about our religions, and it was like, oh, we do that. It was so much
But
more
I'll tell you now, the
acceptance
fear
than
of
that,
being woke,
pushing everybody apart with this.
parents who probably live in the district that are from other organizations trying to stir up trouble. I know some teachers that wouldn't teach these classes anymore. The one was teaching American Studies, which looks at the intersections of literature and history, and he said, I'm not comfortable doing that anymore, I'm just going to be an English teacher. If I can look at old books that don't have current issues. There's a fear of that.
Can I just say this about woke culture in schools? If this is about DEI, that's who we are. That's who public schools are, right? We teach everybody. So we are diversity. If this was about equity, I've already spoken to it. Yes, we raise the standard. We raise up children who have disabilities, who have health issues, to level the playing field for them. If this is about inclusion, teachers learn that a foundation to helping each child succeed is to belong, is to feel safe, is to feel like this school values me. And when we rail against inclusion as if it's something undesirable, it is at the very core of what teachers do. Make sure that every single kid in that classroom feels loved and included. Only then can they achieve.
So James, for you, your experience, you know, I've asked my daughter, I've said, do you feel like there's woke indoctrination? And she just laughs. And I mean, in an age where you can get any book you want online, you can see all sorts of things, have you noticed limited access in libraries? Do you notice teachers being scared to talk about things? What do you think?
So I'm a captain of our debate team at King High School, and so that's a topic that tends to push against what we would consider to be the box of what we're allowed to talk about. And our debate teacher is not allowed to teach us some of the topics that we debate on because it's not allowed by our principal. It's not recommended to be taught. And
Can
so
you give us an example?
certain things that we talk about, I'm a congressional debater, which means that students introduce bills that are going to be debated on and voted on by other students. And that means students in Houston, students in El Paso, students in Uvalde are allowed to submit bills that talk about certain topics. And a student in Uvalde earlier this year submitted a bill that talked about gun violence and talked about regulating gun ownership. Our debate teacher was recommended against speaking and teaching us about how to debate on that bill because it was too controversial. There was a bill about the Ten Commandments, and earlier this week our debate class made a good ruckus when we got that taken down in first period, and we were happy to see that. And even though a majority of our class are Christian, we would rather that not be there because we want to be inclusive to those who aren't in our classroom. And so what we see in our classes are realistically, in libraries, there are books that we can't get. Anne Frank's diary, for some reason, is considered to be passé, which for some reason I don't fully understand. I remember reading that in middle school and being told that I'm not allowed to read that anymore. Is telling. And like I said, we see this in debate. We are not allowed to be educated by our educators to be fully active competitors against other schools that are allowed to have those conversations. And so I would argue, even as a Christian, that I see more crucifixes and conversations about Christ from my teachers than I ever had about political conversations. You could easily make the argument that teachers are more actively indoctrinating students to Christianity than they are about being woke or loving Obama or being a Democrat.
Okay, so I think this is interesting. When you make teachers' jobs harder and you don't pay them enough, then you have teacher shortages. And then eventually you have to replace teachers, and then if you make it easier to replace them, you lower the bar and you put certain ideological mandates, then it helps you change the dynamic in the school. So I think I'd like to talk about teacher shortages, Gabe. I mean, you've fought the good fight, right?
I'm an old man now.
I mean, it's very honorable, but I mean, do you feel like things are getting better or worse? How do you see younger teachers lasting?
I haven't seen a student teacher in about 10 years. So that tells you one thing, is there's not people coming into the profession. And the stat you've heard the stat probably, but for similar education, we get paid 23% less. So yes, there is a pay gap, and there always has been. Steps to improve it have happened, but not enough. So basic finances. You don't go into teaching if you want to raise a family in your 20s and 30s. I don't know many teachers in their 20s or 30s that could afford a house. The teacher I work with in her 4th year, she lives at home. Because you can't afford to live on your own and a teacher's salary around here especially. It used to be the joke that, I don't know who works in Highland Park, because who could afford to live there? Well, it's McKinney, Frisco, Prosper, it's that now. It's pretty everywhere. So what do you do about that? You raise the pay. I think an internship type program, a paid internship, not free labor, which is what student teaching is, where they work for 12 weeks for nothing, right? A paid internship for a year so they can actually be comfortable that first year instead of just, like your first year of teaching, remember that, George, the first year where you just survived? Right? So support the new, pay the new. That's what I would suggest.
I think that being a school teacher today is a supply and demand issue. The demand on teacher time, beyond even, it's already a full-time job just to teach those classes all day long, but the demands on teachers outside of the classroom have grown exponentially in the face of a supply of compensation that's been flat. And so over time, yes, we're idealistically minded, we teachers, right? We're here, there, we're wanting to change kids' lives. We're going to make society better through our work. But over time, that's a beatdown because I'm simply no longer being compensated and the idealism is lost. There's another piece out there too, as I was just talking to a teacher friend yesterday who said, I feel like we can't say anything anymore. And they feel like that their actions, their words in the classroom, around the campus, on social media, can be immediately put into a viral situation, into a firestorm. And that's not they came to teach, to change children's lives. They didn't come to be a politician. Additionally, they have to become legal experts. Education has become very litigious. So there's a reason why teachers are fleeing beyond the pay, right?
Well, I think it's also because of lack of parental support and too many attacks about failing schools, the narrative I don't buy into, by the way. But we have, both my boys are educators, and my oldest teaches 4th grade and loves it. But he also talks about the pressure from the outside pressure that parents are constantly thinking they know better. They know better. I will tell you, I went to college to be an educator. I learned how to do testing. I learned how to identify kids who are struggling. I learned the methods steps to take to remedy those situations, right? We care about kids. We are in that profession because we care, not because we get paid a lot, but because we care. And my other son is now an administrator because of the lower pay, but he still gets to be with kids every day. He has influence on them because he's the one living in Oregon now. But I think it's because of lack of respect for the profession, way more than the pay. Maybe that's wrong, you guys, because I'm not an educator.
$51.49.
But I hear teachers I know talk about this all the time, and I'm in the schools often, right? And we have these conversations quite often, and I think the focus becomes, they're fearful. They're micromanaged. They can't teach how we learned that we're supposed to teach. I know there are a lot of fellow teachers in this room. So we know what we're doing, and especially as you've been in the profession a number of years, it's like any other craft. You hone your craft. The more you do it, you figure it out, right? And this, I'm going to just mention something we haven't talked about, but this competitive pay, incentive pay that our state is driving makes me want to tear somebody's eyeballs out. Because I will tell you personal experience, as a first-year teacher, I wonder what you guys will say about this. I needed the mentorship and collaboration of the more experienced teachers. Fresh out of school, you learn all these things, but man, let me tell you, teaching doesn't necessarily prepare you 100% for your own classroom. We collaborated. My son, one of them was in McKinney ISD, instructional coach. They need that collaboration, right? They need that instruction. The teachers benefit, our students benefit, our society benefits from that kind of collaboration. I hate, this is personal, I hate that incentive pay thing that pits the teachers against teachers. That's all I'll say
What
about
is the
that.
incentive? Angie, can you say what that is shortly, or I don't know what it is?
The incentive pay, it's teacher incentive allotment. So basically, the way we funded our schools this time was to put money in real specific buckets. One is the teacher incentive allotment. So to give your teachers raises, you have to jump through a bunch of hoops.
You have to opt in, right, to that program.
You have to opt in, it takes a couple of years to get, so many of my school districts didn't opt in because they, like you, didn't think it was the right way to give teacher raises. They just want the flexibility to say, we know how to give raises in our schools so that it's appropriate for our district and our schools. But the TEA said, no, we're gonna force you to do it this way through the teacher incentive allotment because we know better. And that then the commissioner actually said, the reason we're doing the funding the way we're doing it this year is because we don't trust our school districts.
Right.
He said that out loud.
The other thing he said out loud, and I'm at a meeting, there was a big chamber meeting in McKinney, I wanted to jump up and go, I object. He said, he talked about the incentive pay, and he said, we don't have a pay problem, we have too many teachers. And I am not making that up. You can go back and look at the video. I'm sure you've heard him say that, said in some speech. But I'm like, really? We have too many teachers? No, we have a state legislature who will, and a governor who will not support public education with the adequate funding that we need.
Well, normally, lower student teacher ratios is what you look for as a parent when you're moving to a school district. So we had 3 McKinney public schools close because they're at about 60% enrollment and they have such big budgetary pressures. And that's linked to lower, younger income families not being able to move there, probably teachers not being able to afford to live there either. But at the end of the day, what does that equate to in terms of parent-teacher ratio? My guess is it's one teacher for every 10 students, and that's probably a good ratio. But what my daughter has is 25, 30 kids in her class. How many kids do you have in your class?
About the same. And students have started to feel what the teacher shortage actually looks like. I'm in mostly AP classes, and AP classes are typically taught by teachers that get certain certifications to teach those classes. We had a class last year where a teacher was put in an AP economics class. And that class, keep in mind, McKinney High School has some of the highest pass rates in the country, and particularly in Texas. Our history APs have pass rates sometimes in the mid to high 90s. And this AP economics class had a pass rate below 10%. This teacher was thrown in a situation that they had no idea how to handle and were given no assistance in doing that. But we have started to feel what that looks like. And when time and time again, we are having our teachers that have been here for 25 years, they retire, and in their place comes a coach that is given no education on that, and is given no chance to really learn and educate himself on how that actually looks like to teach. And students start to feel what that feels like, because we are in an environment where AP and SAT are the basis of how you get into college. And other school districts, even like Prosper, put a much higher emphasis on that than even in McKinney. But when you talk to people in Prosper, the same problems we face here, they face there. They have all these brand new schools, all these fantastic programs, but they don't have the teachers to actually facilitate those programs. And so it goes beyond even just McKinney or local.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, because I tend to think that some of our problems in Texas are covered up by the fact that we have brand new facilities. So they look incredible. I mean, it's kind of a joke on social media, actually. Oh, it looks like a college when they go to Rock Hill High School. But what happens when those facilities are not that new, 5, 10 years from now, after the voucher programs hit? It's scary. So thank you all. I'm going to turn this over to questions from the crowd, if that works. I want to end with one last thing, because you brought it up, James. I want to touch on, first of all, you only pay for what you value, and you value what you pay for. That's the way humans are. So value and teacher pay goes together. If we can afford to pay ICE agents $100,000, $50,000 bonuses, we can afford to pay our school teachers and our policemen. And, we talked about guns. So you are all people heavily involved in education. Does it make sense to arm our school teachers with guns? What if they paid you more? If they could offer you another 25 grand, maybe you're already a gun owner for that qualification. Is it safe? Would it make sense?
Getting a certification to carry a gun is not the same as doing it in a law enforcement capacity with 2,000 students around you. It's not.
Evan, will you give us a chance to rebut Herb's plan?
Yes.
Just in a couple ways.
Yes. And Michael, if you have questions, you can bring them over. Go ahead, Andrew.
Please, come on, ask questions.
Well, we can have a discussion.
Yeah, we can have a side. We'll have
Go
a
for
side.
it, Angie, and then we'll get Amanda
Well,
right
no, she can ask
Okay.
first, just
I just have questions here, I don't have them on no cards. I have a couple of questions. Is that okay?
Go for it.
All right. Okay, so I have a couple of questions and I have a couple of stories. And before I just like nobody off the street, I was a public school teacher from 2000 until 2010. I taught in Lubbock, Odessa, and in Richardson, and then could no longer afford to teach in the district in which I lived. Went into the public sector after that. For Herb, I have 2 recommendations for your research. You touched on a couple of things, and I think this could help develop the case a little bit more. Researching the Nation at Risk report that came out during the Reagan years, back in the 80s, which, do you know about it?
No, I don't. I mean, I'm vaguely aware.
So one of the things that you mentioned earlier was starved public education, and that's where that all began. So when I was a teacher for 10 years, I was involved with the National Education Association. I volunteered as the vice president of our local association in Ector County, which is in Odessa, and would go and make presentations to the school board trying to increase wages and working conditions and things like that for our support staff and for the teachers. And Ector County is right over there by Midland, Odessa, right? So there's some money out there, and so the teachers there at that time when I was there were paid pretty well. So that's one thing, and then the other thing would be to research voucher programs similar to what's been implemented not only in the United States and what is in Texas, but what has
I have looked at international programs.
globally. I think Chile is a good example, if I'm not mistaken, because I used to speak to those things quite a bit, but this was, again, like over 15 years ago. But Chile had decades of research and evidence of how ineffective voucher programs were. And for whatever reason, the United States just won't even look anywhere else at how these things have been implemented internationally.
Yeah.
Vicki, did you say 50% of teachers in Texas aren't certified?
Over 50%. Yes.
Are they in alternative certification programs or?
Yeah, they've gone through, yes, they're either in the process of getting an alternative certification or school districts have gotten waivers because otherwise they can't fill their classrooms.
Okay. That's shocking, and I think I would reiterate for everybody in the room, it's not that we have a shortage of certified teachers in Texas. We have a shortage of certified teachers, like myself, who are willing to still teach.
Right.
We have quality certified teachers, available, but it's undervalued, it's underpaid, it's a whole host of issues for why they don't stay in the profession.
There was a recent story that came out, I think the Texas Tribune maybe, saying only 60% of teachers are now looking for other career options. Because a year prior it was 75% of teachers were looking for other, so they were cheering that now it's only 60%. But again, it goes back to the pay is not there, the support's not there, the state leaders are bashing our public schools, so why would you want to teach? And so,
And Amanda, just one second. So, Herb, I remember from your longer presentations, you've done a fair amount of research on other states that have failed voucher programs.
Yes.
Do you mind just talking to that for a second? Because it was very interesting that.
Well, I mean, the two classes. Well, first of all, understand that many of these voucher programs have actually existed for long periods of time. But the ones that have been successful, and there have been some, are targeted. So some of the early programs were basically voucher programs targeted for disadvantaged students, okay? Or for special needs students. And those worked pretty well for that purpose. What happened after the pandemic, in about 2022, some states decided now would be a good time to make them universal. In other words, make everybody eligible for these vouchers. And that's when things started falling apart. Okay, and so Arizona was the very first state to implement a universal voucher program in 2022, followed shortly by Florida the next year. And so when you talk about the universe of experience, you're really talking about a small number of states okay, that are actually doing universal voucher programs. There's a bunch of them that are starting up, okay? There's also a bunch of them that are being canceled, okay? Certainly the ones that have gathered enough evidence, okay, are canceling. Illinois did it recently, okay?
Kansas.
I'm sorry?
Kansas.
Yeah, there you go. And as I said, a bunch of them are in the lawsuit mode. So I guess as far as specifics, again, I point to Arizona and Florida. Okay, and that's why I wear this. You see me wear the T-shirt that says, "I've seen the movie and I've read the book. Vouchers don't work." Okay. All right. Well, the movie is Florida, but Arizona wrote the book. Okay. I mean and so basically I focus on those two states, and where I gather my data is from inside those states. So I don't look at people writing about. I go to the good investigative reporters that are in those states and look at what they're writing about. Okay, and so that's basically where I get my data. But again, I guess I'll just make the blanket statement. Universal voucher programs do not work. Boom.
If you
End of
want
story.
more detail on that, I'm a big reader, and we talked about this book because Herb has used it. It's Josh Cowan. He was in Austin testifying when I was down there testifying about vouchers. He's done so much research on it. This is called The Privateers, How Billionaires Created a Culture War, which obviously came out of COVID, right? And sold school vouchers. So I want to just reiterate, I think we often forget that part of the voucher program is the ideology about privatization, right? And why? Because privatizing means we make money, just like the guy I told you about who made the $154 million. It becomes about money, not about our students. It becomes about how do we make the most money we can. Look at corporate America and the privatization, and I love Senator Nathan Johnson's, we had him for a forum last fall, and he talked about our students are not soap bottles made by P&G, for example, and I thought that was such a good analogy. Our kids are not rolling off an assembly line, right? They all have so many different unique needs, right? But at the end of the day, we have to look at how that money is being utilized, because we cannot talk about just competition like our soap bottles and P&G, working against Lever Brothers or whomever. But as we look at that and compare, right, we're thinking about how we can best educate our kids and not just about the money, where market competition focuses on money. Because how do you get more money for your stakeholders, period? You fire people, right? You cut corners often, and that's what we hate to see in public education.
One of the things I might mention, just as far as this competitive notion, you hear a lot about, okay, well, our schools are failing, so therefore we must privatize them, because we want competition. And so you hear, that's kind of one of the mantras of these guys. But as it turns out, of course, it isn't really competition. It's like the football metaphor of our state 6A division champion playing the 1A champion. It's just not, it's not fair. It doesn't work.
But our schools are already, I bet you can support this. McKinney High wants to be the best high school, right?
I thought you were going to say
It is.
they're at football.
We talk about this all the time. McKinney students want to, best Frisco students, or there's innate competition
Sure,
all the time, and I think we forget to talk about that, right? But one of the things I was going to say, and then I'll shut up because I'm sorry, but
Here comes.
I do have issue with the narrative that so many people have bought in that our schools are failing. I'm at campuses all the time. I have 2 grandkids who are in school. I volunteer at their schools, among others. And our schools are doing great things every day. If you went to the school board meetings and you saw the accomplishments of our children, I met James today, and we've had these discussions, and I'm like, wow, this is our future. It's impressive. You're impressive. I love this. Our kids are working so hard. So I'm a big reader. One of the books that has influenced my thinking about public education is Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond, who also wrote Evicted a few years back. But this also with my imaginary BFF, Diane Ravitch, who I don't know if anybody knows who she is. She's 87 now, and she's considered the foremost expert in public education, policy and research. She worked in Bush's cabinet as Assistant Secretary of Education, and she served under Obama, and she was a big voucher proponent, and I love this about her, which is one of the reasons I admire her. She has done a 180 and said vouchers don't work. The policies, the research shows vouchers do not improve student outcomes, which is the one argument we hear all the time. We need to make our schools better, but here's what she says, and that is sort of collaborated by Matthew Desmond's book. The thing we need to really fix is poverty. And so one of our things, we should collaborate, all of us, and get a plan to fix poverty. And one of the ways we can do that is by electing people who will unapologetically go out and fight for programs that are working, like Medicaid, like SNAP, like CHIP, we cannot let these programs go, because we all know, we forget when we talk about public schools, that two big indicators of success are family income and education background. And so look, we're trying to make these kids who come from families who are working 2 and 3 jobs just to survive, we are trying to have their parents support them educationally. They don't have the time, bandwidth, and sometimes the knowledge. And so we can do a better plan to think about how do we do that. And one of the things we have to really impress upon people is it matters who you vote for on the state level. Vicki's talked about, when she's elected, what she'll do with funding for education. It's important that we think about who we're going to the polls to check the box for. Evan, I know when you win on the races, we forget how important they are. Our state makes all these decisions about the funding, and okay, I'm done. Sorry. This is my soapbox,
Well,
I guess.
if I may, I'll make one more comment. We can argue on the side.
I support you.
Yeah, but it's not this group that needs the education.
No.
Okay, and the reason I wear this T-shirt, okay, is I go out into the local Walmart out in the boonies, out where I live in the hill country, and I stand in the middle of Walmart, and I wait for somebody to ask me what's out. Okay, and honest to God, most of them have no clue. Okay, they sure as heck don't know what a voucher is. Never heard of it. Hasn't hit them yet. And so that's really the group that needs the education that we're talking about here. Now, my plan is to basically go into enemy territory over the next year. I'm going out and talking to the Kiwanis clubs. I'm going out to speak at Tea Party meetings. Okay, I'm going out to basically anybody that will have me come talk about this stuff, because those are the folks that are clueless. Those are the ones who are voting just because they think they don't trust Democrats.
Well, I mean, Democrats have a long, hard road in Texas.
Yes,
Vicki knows better than anybody.
yes,
But public education is a winning issue.
yes,
So Democrats
absolutely,
need to stand together
absolutely.
and focus on public education and this very real war on public education
Right,
now at every level, local, state, and federal.
absolutely.
Everybody wants their student to have the best school. Everybody. I don't care which side of the aisle you're on. Everybody wants a great school for their child.
I think there's a segment of the population, I don't know that I can precisely identify them, that don't value public education in the same way that we do in this room today. Okay? I mean, we understand that public education is about community building. and success, even for the people who get into it. I mean, you know, I've got 4 teenage granddaughters. They're all in the public school system in Texas. I got 2 of them in Keller, 2 of them down in Katy. My kids, of course, were educated in public schools. Me too. And so I know how successful, how good they can be. But there's a segment of the population that votes, okay, that don't understand what we're saying, that don't value the public schools in the same way that we do. And that's needs to be it. And that,
right?
huh?
Don't you think that's a lot to do with the narrative that we hear all the time, that our schools are failing?
I know.
Yeah.
That's the message going out there. But even out, okay, that message goes out there, but they've got no private school options to go to.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
I've met people that are apathetic about public school. I met with a voter that actually his wife used to be a public school teacher. She was so upset for whatever reason it was that she became a homeschooler. They homeschooled all their kids. But this is like, you don't have to convert everybody to win elections.
Right.
You need to get the apathetic and the uninvolved to care.
Yes.
And there are real reasons to care. So I mean, I admire you for going to Walmart. I'll buy a shirt. But you know, I think this is an easy way to get people to care. Is your kid in public school? Did you go to public school? Well, guess what's happening to our public schools?
Right.
I mean, if you could show rural commerce what that high school will lose in 3 years, that's their community being torn apart.
Well, weren't there Republicans in rural communities, Republican representatives in rural communities with Democrats against the voucher program?
Yeah.
They knew what they were gonna lose.
Yeah.
So how do you equate, if the representatives knew what they were gonna lose, to the people who you're saying don't have a clue? I see that as a mismatch.
If I can say that a lot of the representatives will say the right thing in front of their community, in front of their audience, oh, I support our public schools, and then they vote the other way.
Right.
And their community never knows.
Right.
Weren't
That's
a
right.
lot of them primary? The
Yeah,
rural
so only a
legislators that
couple
were
of them-
fighting so hard to prevent the vouchers, they were primary and.
But I'm talking about those who were supportive of vouchers. I'm talking about my next door neighbor, the representative west of me, will all day long tell her school superintendents, her school principals, oh, I love your schools, great schools, love them. And they probably know, but many of the families in the district don't realize that she voted for vouchers. Similar, the one to the north of me, in the Leander School District.
Don't forget the one who's out by me.
Yeah, well, that's who I was talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, the Leander School came to the Capitol and tried to, pressure them to say, are you for or against vouchers? And they won't say, because so few people do the research. How did my representative actually vote on these things? Most people don't even know who their representative is.
That's true.
And so it's, it is hard to educate people because, the vast majority aren't coming to events like this. We have to go to them, but how do we get in front of them? And,
Right.
How do you say, well, your representative is lying to you?
Right.
It's like that.
So, Jeremy, I wanted to, you had your hand up for a while,
Yes.
so.
So the problem I see is that it is completely intentional. It's by design to go and make sure that the populace is uneducated so that they are easy to manipulate, easy to control, easy to go and make them into the worker bees. We talk about, students aren't someone on an assembly line, but that's what they want. They want worker bees that are just interchangeable. So they want this to be an uneducated populace. They want it to be easy to control, and so that they can serve the rich and powerful. So we need to go and break down that, that's the problem, is that rich and powerful are putting all this money into the voucher program and making it purposely to destroy our public schools, to go and make sure that they stay in power, they stay in control, they stay with their money, to go and push people down and make them just working for the man, working for, as a fiefdom. That's what they want to do. So the only way I see to do this is to go and make sure we get people in power that understand that part of it and make actual change. Everyone wants good schools, they want their kids into good schools, but if the people in power just kowtow to the rich and powerful, we're gonna be lost.
Yeah, we don't have, government is usually an independent and equal partner to business, and they work together to great effect to grow the middle class. That's what's happened.
It's supposed to.
Right, but now we have a different problem. We have big business in government, especially in Texas.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mega church billionaires, frankly, funding 97% of Vicky's opponents. So,
And shrinking
Yeah.
middle class.
yeah, exactly. So I mean, we have to get big business out of government. The only way to do that is to get people who will not be bought into power. And the only way to do that is to activate the vote.
One of the most effective ways we can do that is to keep having conversations with your friends. We have these conversations all the time, right? With people we come in contact with. So, because they begin to respect you, even if you're on different sides of the aisle, when you talk about some of these issues, that is one of the most powerful ways we can educate people without being in their face, so to speak. Just have that influence and keep having conversations with your book club, with the people you're meeting with, and don't be afraid to speak up and say what is. I think too often I hear, oh, I can't say that. Yes, you can. You don't have to beat them with it, but you can talk about the why you believe what you believe and what your experiences are and what you see. And that is a powerful way to help us get out the vote and encourage people to vote for the people we need to get elected.
Okay, we have 25 minutes left. All right, so I'm going to read a couple questions for people that follow the rules. And then we're going to go back to the audience, okay? So, my son has Down syndrome since middle school. His teachers have been preparing him for work. Now we are continually having to advocate for his FOF teachers, work towards him getting a job. They say since jobs for him are since COVID jobs are no longer affordable. Thank you. Available. They have to be able to work just like a regular student. They no longer have specialized job placements. Is this also due to a lack of funding?
So I think what they're talking about is the federal COVID dollars stopped last year, or maybe even the year before.
Yeah.
That funded a lot of these things, federal money, so that's gone. And there's no way the Trump administration is going to put money back into education.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting. Like the federal government has in history with things like the New Deal and the Great Society had broad reforms that change everybody's lives, that move people from the lower caste to the middle class, that catch people when they fall. And there's this assumption that the federal government, I ran into this when I was first started campaigning. People said, oh, schools isn't a federal issue. I mean, if we as the voters want the federal government to help fund schools, then we can advocate for reforms for the federal government to lift up schools and in a great manner. If they can pay ICE agents, they can pay teachers. And the teachers don't have to carry the guns that the ICE agents carry. So COVID was a unique example of the federal government coming to everybody's aid because it was a global health crisis. And there were programs that worked and helped people, and now they're all being cut, like the ACA subsidies with healthcare. So did that answer? I don't know who asked the question.
It did, because I won't say during our IEPs or anything like that we have, but the reason.
Okay, question for Gabe specifically.
Back here.
That's
So,
a primary question.
so I found it really interesting when you were talking about the banning of books and
School funding formulas. How do those work exactly? And when we say ours is out, it's out of date. And this isn't meant to stump anybody, but it sounds complicated and it also sounds out of date. So
Yeah, well, back in 2017, the legislature actually pulled a commission together. They brought superintendents from all over the state together for 10 or 12 meetings throughout the year before session in 2019. And so the feedback from that really changed our formulas At that time, they weren't actually as complicated, but they still are. So we have a basic allotment, which is the $6,160, which we bumped up $55 this time. And that's what every student gets. And on top of that, you have weights. And then you have the different buckets for transportation, for school security, for teacher incentive allotment. I mean, there's just so many different buckets. And there's the golden penny and the copper penny. And I feel like when you start talking about that, it sounds like a fairy tale. And it's just way too complicated because there's no way anyone can grasp all that. And as a legislator, it's very interesting because we want to know when the school funding bill passes, how are our school districts going to come out? Because I'm going to vote for it if my school districts are doing better, but I'm not going to vote for it if my school districts aren't doing better. And they give each of us what they call the runs. And this is a spreadsheet that shows a run of numbers. But they call it the runs. And they're very secretive about it. You only get your own districts, and it always looks better than what the actual numbers are later on. And it's a horrible way to do it because, again, we're just looking, each legislator is saying, oh, my districts are doing okay, so I'll vote for this bill. But the reality is none of the districts are doing well. And the numbers look a whole lot better than reality. So it's, who comes up with these numbers? Well, the Legislative Budget Board, and they make a lot of assumptions. It's just like any household budget or business budget. You have to make a lot of assumptions. Oh, well, the assumptions change. There weren't as many students enrolled. There, what have you, it changes. And so while it looked really great when we voted for the bill, maybe it doesn't look so great after the fact.
Maybe you guys could make a budget or get in session every year so that.
My first session, I tried to amend the budget, the school funding bill, to have an automatic increase according to inflation. And of course, the chairman of the committee said, oh, we can't tie the hands of future legislators. Well, last 2023, there was another member in the majority party who had that same component in the school funding bill, but it got stripped out. So the problem is we make this a political issue, school funding. It should not be a political issue, but the legislature will say, oh, we changed the funding last session. We don't need to touch that again. Oh, we changed the funding 2 sessions ago. We don't need to do that now. And it just goes so many years without an update that our school districts are like, we can't count on the legislature helping us. Yeah.
And inflation doesn't change in 2 years at all.
I'm proud of everybody here. This has been a marathon. There hasn't been any screaming. We've actually listened to experts and people who know what they're talking about, and had real dialogue and discussion, and I feel smarter. So I want to thank our panelists. First of all, thank you so much, every one of you, for being here. Verb, you really rocked it. I didn't know if you were going to be able to